Welcome to the Mobile Hunters Dojo, a community helping hunters reach their full potential in the woods and in life. I'm your host, Matt Lear. Come on in, kick off your shoes, and take a seat on the mat as we develop a mindset for success, forge self-discipline, practice the art of continuous improvement, and hone our craft. Welcome back to the dojo, everybody. This is Matt Lear, and this is the first episode of The Breakdown. I'm joined by Chris Grant. Chris is a high-level hunter here in Michigan, a dear friend of mine. He's very low-key, but definitely a black belt. I brought Chris in to help break down some of these key aspects of episode 21 with Ty Jennings, and then at the end, I've got Ty Jennings himself breaking down a two-step process of find and study. So you're going to get your notebook out. We're going to dive deep, and we're going to jump right in with the first clip where Ty talks about hunting from the ground.
The ground thing, I always thought I had to be in a tree. And I'm like, I don't have to be in a tree. Why do I need to be in a tree? I'll carry the tree stand because it's light and it's compact. It's low profile. But if there's a tree, great. But I've been busted too many times being close to these deer beds, climbing a tree. It's taken me an hour to put 2 sticks up, and then there he goes. So a lot of times now it's more anxiety driven. I can't bring myself to climb up. I'll just stay on the ground.
All right. I'm going to stop it right there because there's more to that we're going to get into.
Yeah.
But so I think a lot of guys, like that's a real foreign thing to do, to like forego the tree stand. I got it on my back and then hunt from the ground.
Yeah, you have all your gear. You think you need to get in the tree and use that stuff. But I mean, if you're playing the wind already and you can get some ground cover, why not stay on the ground? If you're hunting that up close bed scenario, and I've done it like many times where I've actually climbed that tree where I was like taking forever to get up that tree, and I've bumped deer like that. Good bucks doing that. So I'm never afraid to just stay on the ground and get into some cover on the ground. You don't need to get into that tree. The advantage of getting into that tree is being able to see a lot more. I can say that. That's why we all hunt out of a tree, right? We're not on that ground level of that deer. But if you're already getting up close to a mature buck bed and you know his route, why do you need to get in that tree?
Well,
and a lot of it's hard for people to concept that, to stay on that ground.
I think, for me, if I put myself in that situation, a lot of times I don't have the specific bed. Like I'm hunting more of the complex.
Yep.
And so I'm thinking if I get up in the tree, then I can see further. And if he walks out and takes a different route, I'll have a shot.
Right.
Where if I stay on the ground, I feel like I'm really limiting myself to one tiny little run. And it makes me feel like I've just like eliminated options for myself.
Yeah. So in that situation, what you just said is you're playing a more reserved game. Ty is getting right up into that buck bedding area. He's already done his homework. He knows where that buck is bedding. And he said it in his podcast. He's hunting 5-6-year-old bucks. This is these mature bucks. I mean, are in solitude areas. He's accessing it the right way, and he's getting within what did he say? 40, 50 yards? I think 40 yards.
40.
If you don't have that security cover getting up into a tree that close, you will bust them. So why not play that ground game?
So it goes back to like doing the homework.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't play that ground game if you don't have that homework done. And if you're not playing that up close, bed, scenario, I mean, there's no reason to be afraid to climb up into a tree. But when you're like, Ty, you already have your homework done and that buck's route coming in and out of that bed, there's no need to get up in there.
So it's important to like for listeners too, then to go back and listen. We're not going to be able to hit on every single point of this podcast. This is the deep dive part of it. So if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to the full one because he talks about glassing these river bottoms and these bedding areas to get an eye on these deer and watching their patterns, watching them move in and out. He will use trail cameras from time to time, but it doesn't sound like it's often. He's getting his actual eyes on the deer leaving the beds. And so he's got a really good idea of that. Even that idea is foreign for.
Yeah. I mean, off season, I've done that in off season. I'll climb a tree. I'll go glass from a tree if it's in big timber or whatever, river bottoms, fields, whatever high advantage that you can get where you can see, just as if you were going on an early September hunt out in the open plains, like get on the end of a draw, a finger and get up high and glass a bunch, like Ty's already coming into his deer season with a bunch of his homework done already.
So that's the difference too, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to have your homework done.
You can't apply these tactics unless you've done that homework. Some of these tactics, some you can, but this one in particularly, like I think you would be, if you're just get a general idea, then this probably isn't the method to use.
No.
Do you think, all right, let's just say this. If you only have a general idea, like, so you have, let's say you put up some trail cameras, you've gotten, a good buck regular on this trail camera. This trail camera is maybe 100 yards outside of bedding. He's hitting it. You're still getting him in daylight. You can kind of figure that out, but you don't have them pinpointed. The general, how would you approach that? Would you sit back and climb up or would you even like sit back and just do an observation stand and just kind of get closer to where he's leaving?
Are we talking in season?
Yeah, we're talking in season.
In season.
This is for the guy who didn't get a chance to do that.
So if I'm in season and I do have cameras up and I'm getting them 100 yards away from the bedding area that I know that they're coming from, and they're daylighting.
Let's say it's iffy. Let's say it's like kind of like right at dark.
Right. Okay, so a lot of the mature bucks want to like wait till the last minute, right? So they get up, out of their beds. It's like you're losing that. You're at your last 5-10 minutes of daylight. That's where Ty's getting it done because he's playing that within that 40 yards. So a lot of the times that people are too reserved and they are backed up, they're playing that route that they're getting them on camera 100 yards back. Well, now your situation is, well, now you're in that tree, right? And now you don't even want to get out of that tree because now you're going back and thinking, oh, that deer came through last 10 minutes. Now I'm afraid to get down because he could be coming. And then when you get down and it's dark, right at last minute, you're busting that deer out, you just screwed up your opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to do your homework and get up close to bed, the mature buck beds.
So it's funny. I always find myself trying to find another way for the guy who didn't do that,
Yeah.
But really the truth is you got to get in there and do the homework ahead of time.
And it all depends on, what time of the season it is too. For here in Michigan, like, your first week of October, I mean, you could catch these bucks off their game real quick that first week before the, human pressure hits the woods. So you have a little bit of flexibility doing it that first week. But man, here in Michigan, we're high pressured, right? After that first week, you go into that mid-October, everybody calls the lull. Well, it's not really a thing. They're still out there. But now they're just not wanting to move because of the human pressure. They're still doing that routine, but now you got to back up off of ag field. You got to get past all the doe bedding that's close to all your food, and you got to get back in towards that solitude bedding.
Ty's going out. He's finding the beds. What do you think he's looking for when he finds a mature buck bed? What does it look like?
So for me, like a real mature buck bed, it's, how do I explain this? So it's a solitude area, like let's say a cattail marsh. There's, like in big timber, you're not, you could be in big timber and then like hit, like say a river, like a wall of thicket towards the river. And you're to the south is, ag field 300-400 yards away. Let's say 500 yards away. Well, everybody wants to, hunt that up close stuff. Well, them mature bucks are going all the way back as far as they can get towards that river where there's no access to it, So when I'm trying to find that buck bedding area, I find a lot of it in like if you're in the hills, on ridges where they can see thermals are working in their advantage, high hummocks, like on the outside of like a doe bedding area. But the mature buck beds, I like to find them like in the edge of like cattail swamps. Like I'll follow a faint runway that goes just a couple different ways into a finger coming into the hardwoods. And a lot of the times I like walking in there and you see one single buck bed. And he's got a couple routes to get in and out of there. So that deer's got options. So when you see that there, it's an absolute spot where he's alone. It's one buck bed. You see the size, right? When you find them, it's hard to find a mature buck bed. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough to do, but they're not going to be, if you go out scouting and your hunting area that, where all these guys walk, from access points, you gotta like start looking at that farthest stuff in where it's hard to get to, start there. And what I like is where they bed, they typically they'll have, wind over their back and where they bed, they can see a little ways, What in them cattail marshes, it's like where I typically find like a nice buck bed, a mature buck bed, is where there's like one single tree or like a patch, of dogwood or something like that on a point. It's just an area where he's left alone. People are not walking in there. They don't want to walk through that wet, marshy stuff. If you start talking outside of like, if you don't have the cattails, go back to that hardwood scenario, like where I'm finding them mature bucks is like, the farthest access point, and you'll start to hit like a thick wall. It always seems like, you're walking through hardwoods. It's kind of open. There's some ridges that go through the hardwoods, but you get way back in there and it's just like a thicket. And sometimes where I find them is like just inside that thicket line where they're looking out and they can see that edge and they got that advantage and they're bedding there again with the wind in their back and they're looking out. So they got many ways to get out of there, if something gets in there and bumps them out.
How do you know when you're looking at the bed that it's not a 3-year-old or 2.5-year-old?
You really don't unless you lay eyes on that deer.
Going back to what Ty does.
Going back to what Ty does. You got a glass. You gotta put eyes on that deer. You can't just assume any buck bed is, that's a 5-year-old. You know what I mean? Like you gotta find them beds and then put it in your head and assume that, okay, this is a mature buck bed. Now you got to go back to, if you're a camera guy, start following them little faint trails out of that buck bed, back up, get away from that bed, and put up some trail cameras and lay eyes on them through your cameras, or get out there on the outside of that cattail swamp and where your little, oak flats are, and go out there and glass. Well, and here's another thing too, outside of them faint trails. Okay. So if like in postseason scouting, on the outside of that thicket, that marsh, typically like there's some sign that'll lead up to it being a mature buck, because outside of that marsh thicket, when you get into them oaks and you come across the buck rub that's just scraped all the hell that's on an 8-inch diameter tree, it's a good sign that you're there. Mm-hmm. You've walked a half a mile to the west, you've walked a half a mile to the east, your swamp's south, and you haven't found anything other than you found that rub. And then you go out onto the point of this oak flat and you start following a faint trail in there, and boom, you find that buck bed. Mm-hmm. It's a good sign that it's a pretty good bet.
Yeah.
Pretty good buck using that area.
Now, have you ever gone in during the summer? Because Ty does talk about that, where he's going in and like climbing up in the tree stand. He's got binocs or a scope, and he's glassing these deer after he finds some of these beds. Is that something that you ever tried before?
Yeah, I've sat in tree stands in the summertime. Not really typically in the timber.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like he's got a little bit more advantage of what our layout here is in Michigan. River bottom, some more open stuff. It's a little more tough to do that here. His scenario kind of sounds like what I hunted out in, North Dakota, river bottoms. Man, when I heard him say that clip, I can just put myself in that situation when I was out in North Dakota hunting. Yes, absolutely. You could get up in a tree and you can see for miles, but it's thick. It's tall, grassy areas, in those scenarios. Why not do it? Because you don't need to go in and bump deer. You can stay back and see forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little harder here in Michigan to do that. So, I mean, it's situational.
Yeah.
On the layout of your land.
Yeah. Which is important so there's still a way to do it though. You just got to figure, like, if it could be, and it's not going to be as accurate as showing them leave that bed, but it could be glassing the ag fields that are half mile around. Yeah.
So like around here, we have ag fields, and I'll go back in a mile to 2 miles into the swamps, but I'll watch the ag fields, early season, summertime, August, September. That's when you glass them. You glass those fields and you see where they're coming in and out of, and then in that direction of where they're coming in and out of, then play that game where, come deer season, they're going to go back in there a mile, 2 miles.
It was really cool this week. I was watching Instagram and Brian Dombrowski puts out a clip and he's in the swamps or like
with his head net on.
Yeah. There's bugs everywhere. He's sweating it up. He's deploying his cameras, doing his work. And then Ryan Glitsky is out there. He's deploying a bunch of cameras, sweating his butt off. Ty talks about it. He's constantly out there throughout the woods or throughout the year, glassing these deer, getting his eyes on these deer. I see that pattern over and over and over with guys who consistently kill. They don't take the summers off.
Mm-mm.
I mean, they're out there getting it done right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They're gathering that information so that they can get 40 yards from the bed.
Yeah.
And this is the time that they're doing it.
Well, these are guys that are postseason scouting when the foliage is off too. So they already have a bunch of intel to go off of. This is where they're bedding. Okay, now they're in the summertime playing that middle game. What route are they taking to ag? Or what's the main food source, whatever. And then they're just deploying, their tactics, getting trail cameras on trails, finding, what areas, like, right now, summertime, you're finding what kind of forbs are growing up, what green new growth in the woods. A lot of that woods, there's no green on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So you got, they like the deer, they feed naturally. They don't need ag fields.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need any of that stuff. They can survive what's in the wood, off of what's in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those guys are at it, man. They're finding all that. They're playing that middle game right now in the summertime.
I love
because them mature bucks ain't way back in there right now.
Yeah.
You can go in them swamps and go off your postseason scouting, and you're most likely not going to bump a buck out of there right now. They're all up at the egg.
That's what it really kind of hit me this week was I used to think that guys were actually scouting in the summertime, but they're not. This is like phase 2 of the plan.
Yep.
They go out, they gather, and that's how they're efficient in that postseason scouting. And this is where I would get lost and only be able to cover so much ground for so much, because sometimes I'd be hanging, trail cameras during that time. I'm not collecting enough data. What they're going out there, they're collecting all of that data, coming back to the house, breaking it down, and then they're going out. They've got a plan for the summertime to go out, deploy the cameras, glass, prep stands, all that stuff. And they're just setting the stage for opening day or whenever they're going back out.
Yeah. Postseason scouting, going back to that, you could be a clown in the woods. You could zigzag all over wherever you want, cover every little square foot of that area, and you'll come across it. Once you find it, then, mark it on your OnX, put it all together, start mapping that out. Right now, these guys are going off of that intel where those mature bucks are bedding, And now they're playing that middle game. Now they're trying to figure out, okay, where are they traveling?
Mm-hmm.
So come October, they can hunt that middle game. But now, like I said, once you get past that first week or two, you got to get back in where they're, where you found those beds in the postseason scouting.
It's so cool how we started off just talking about not climbing in a tree. And it's never just as simple as, okay, go walk up and just do that. There's a whole backstory to how you even get to that situation. But so now let's go back to that moment though. So you've killed deer off the ground. What advice can you give somebody who's on the ground for the first time, bucks walking in? What's that like? I don't know. Is there anything or they just got to figure it out? Like, how does that work?
Oh man, it's tough.
So it's really something you just got to get in there and not be afraid to mess up and try.
Yeah. No, you got to get in there and make them mistakes. You learn from them mistakes,
Do you want to say anything else about that? Being that close, 40 yards, not getting up in the tree. Is there anything more to unpack there?
No, I mean, it's all situational. It depends, if you've done your homework and you're getting into a tree that you got some cover to get up into, get up in that tree. Mm-hmm. If the wind's right, you accessed it right, you didn't bump them out, and you're at, within 40 yards of that deer and you didn't bump them out of there, get in that tree if you can. But the point of talking about this is you don't need to.
Yeah.
You don't always need to.
Yeah.
Like I said, like there's many times, there's not many times, but there's been a few times where I got way too close and I knew I was too close.
Mm-hmm.
I creeped up that tree. It felt like 20 minutes to a half hour setting up. Once I got that third stick, boom, he was right there. And I knew it, I knew he was going to be there, but it's a chance you take.
Yeah. So I was talking to Rendell Eric, and I think he said this on podcast before too. What he'll do is when he finds those beds, he'll bring like an orange vest with him or orange hat, and he'll set it in the bed and then like climb up in the trees around it to see how high he can get before he sees that orange hat.
That's a great tactic.
Yeah.
That's an awesome idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you could do as well if you had, and that's postseason.
Yeah.
You're not doing that. You're not doing that like
no,
close to season or right now even. Yeah.
Come September, you better not be messing around in there. No.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was one of the things I heard him say that he's done before too.
That's one thing talking about that September scouting. You better have your game plan together before September.
Yeah.
I mean, September comes around, you better be like in your truck glassing or like staying on the edge of the field. I wouldn't be going in no timber in September.
So let me ask you this question on that one. I'm glad we're going down these rabbit holes too, because I think when guys hear a podcast, I'll just speak for myself. In the past, I would hear a podcast and I would hear like, oh, you had to get your homework done. You missed the boat for this year. And it was almost like, well, I guess I'm just going to hunt like I've always hunted them and then when postseason comes next year, I'll do my homework and I'll do it. Right. But then I'm kind of just letting this year be what every year has been before. Would you say, like, for a guy who's listening to us right now going, damn it, that's new information to me. Dang it, I missed the boat. Should he just wait till like next year, or should he go out there and dive in right now in the summertime?
Dive in right now. Do it right now. Like, make mistakes. Yeah. Know that it's your year to make mistakes. Get out there, find the deer, and just learn that layout of that land. Don't wait. Yeah. Don't wait.
I knew the answer to that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go
your first year, it's going to suck. If you're a new hunter and you waited too late and you're now just listening to it in September. Yeah. The game ain't over. You know, you have the rut. Yeah. It's anybody's game in the rut.
Yeah. But I mean, right now, it's June. If we, this is going to go out this week. So
you can get a lot of scouting done in June. I mean, you got a couple more months of good scouting before you got to really start worrying about that.
It's harder to find the things that you're looking for.
It is.
But work your ass off.
It is. Yeah.
How bad do you want it?
Yeah. How bad do you want it? For sure. Yeah.
So let's let Ty keep talking, because he goes into something else that we both thought was really good to talk about here. Let's listen to this. How many times have you put in that work and Just didn't see a deer that day.
Well, it's a lot. I mean, it's like anybody else. I don't see many deer. I don't see many deer because I'm on public land in New York. And then add in the factor that I'm only targeting 5, 6+ year old deer. You just don't see a lot of deer.
All right.
I love it.
Yeah. I'll let you go, Chris. Go ahead.
So my take is the reason why Ty's not seeing many deer is because he's in that solitude area. He's hunting that solitude, mature buck bedding area. These are areas that, not many does are in. You're not going to see those 2.5, 3.5-year-olds. They're not there yet. They're the 2 and 3-year-olds are up where the does are.
Mm-hmm.
Closer to ag, where everybody else is hunting. They're running around. If you're a king in a kingdom, right? Where does he sleep? He sleeps in his big mansion, his big room, all by himself, or with his queen.
Mm-hmm.
That's during the rut. Okay, if we're talking deer, he doesn't want to be pestered. He wants to be alone. You have to find those areas to kill them, the mature bucks. And that's why, and you're going to give up a lot of that when you're trying to hunt mature bucks. You're going to start seeing less deer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going out and hunting and you're hunting and seeing a bunch of does, a bunch of spikes, fours, you're not hunting in the right spot. You are not hunting in the right spot because those are all your peasant deer. They haven't learned. They don't have that age on them. They don't even know where they want to bed. They haven't found a bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't made a place for themselves. So them mature bucks ain't going to be even pestering with that.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's why Ty's not seeing many deer. And I find myself getting in that situation, where I don't see very many deer either. I'm in, and it is kind of, it's area where it's low density of deer. And like, I'll talk about like one of my spots. There's a lot of ag in the area that I hunt, but where I hunt is 2 mile, like I'm going to say at least 1.5 miles. Come mid-October, that's where I'm at, way back in security cover, away from all the pressure, away from all the access, and I'm diving in there. Once you start doing that, you're not going to see very many deer. You'll see a bunch of does and young bucks up towards access and running away from parking lots because they don't know any better.
Yep.
Them big mature bucks, they don't want to be pestered. They're going to be in them areas where nobody's going. There's no pressure. And that's what you get. And that's where when people talk about, pushing in far, that's why I think it's important to have like your shit together and like, a plan, have your maps. 'Cause you don't want to go out and hack a trail down and follow it the same way in all the time. You know how many times I've seen that? It's amazing. I actually used one of them guys' trails and I used them to get back in there. And then I'm still going on my own path for another 0.5 mile.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll use that human pressure back in there. I'm talking about, this is a spot where it's already 1 mile in and there's a human cut trail where many guys are using the same trail, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll still push another 0.5 mile past that. And then that's where I'm finding that good sign. Did he say about the buck rubs or the scrapes in that clip? I didn't remember.
Mm-mm.
The hubs?
No.
Okay. No, that was another clip I wanted to touch on.
Okay. Well, let's go to that one. Let's go to the scrape one. And then I've got one that I want to go to after that.
I don't typically find a lot of rubs or scrapes, and I don't know why. And I theorize that maybe it's a conscious defense mechanism, but I don't know if deer can reason that way. Like, are they associating their sign with being shot at? I don't know. It also could be a deer density thing. When I do find it, it's kind of in like a hub where a lot of bucks will be.
Yeah. So where he said that he doesn't find a whole bunch of, sign where he hunts these mature bucks. Well, the reason why he's not finding a whole bunch of sign is that buck's relaxed. His testosterone levels are low. Like, he doesn't need to lay down that sign. He's not in competition. There's no other 2, 3-year-old, 4-year-old bucks that are in that area where he feels threatened, where he's got to lay that sign down. That's just what I believe in.
Yeah, I think this is very like situational to where you are in the country.
Absolutely.
So New York, very similar to Michigan, high pressure. I hear this all the time from like even Josh Arbogast, you know him?
Yep.
Like Josh will say this all the time when he's scouting his areas. He's like, I'm not finding rubs. Like,
because it's high pressure. Them bucks are going to lay low. They're going to move late. They're going to be in a solitude area where there's not even like trees to even rub on.
and I hunt states that are optimized for my success.
Yeah.
And when I go there, like I get depressed when I come back to Michigan because when I go, I'm finding rubs all over the place. I put together in those areas that had a ton of rubs is you had multiple big bucks that were fighting for an area.
Yeah.
Like they're letting it be known that they're there and they're trying to let everybody else know that they're there. And there's other guys there that aren't afraid of them. And they're like, well, we're here too, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's way more competition based. And then here, like you just said, he's the king of the jungle. There ain't nobody else that's going to take his throne.
No, he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't need to lay that sign down.
No.
I mean, he's already in an area where he's not being pestered.
Yeah.
Let's
hit on the too late to the game thing. Because Ty talks about a method that he uses.
Okay.
Can I play that clip real quick? And
Yeah,
then,
go ahead.
And then we'll talk about it.
I know there's a deer here, but I don't know where he is. It's 1,000 acres. Put the stand on your back or leave it in the truck and carry your bow and just go look for him. Period. Literally go look for him. Go try to bump him. You can bump him 3, 4, 5 times and he's going to come back. Unless you shoot him, in my experience, they're going to always come back. They verified when they've been bumped that their bedding strategy works.
Right now, every guy who hasn't done the postseason scouter is like, yes, I knew there was a way.
There's a chance.
So you say there's a chance.
So I love this part because we're going to kind of go back on what we said earlier about not going in September. When we talked about that earlier, that's for like having an idea and a game plan on a certain specific area.
Mm-hmm.
If you're too late to the game, absolutely do exactly what Ty did. If you can go in season and lay eyes on something, go in, follow where you've seen that deer and go in and go explore. But, go slow, walk slow, pay attention to what you're doing. And like he says, I've bumped deer many times where I've actually got back up into that tree or got into a tree in that area and seen deer come back.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that it's him coming back. But there's many times where they'll circle downwind and they'll try to get you. That's the problem. But if you play it right and use the wind to your advantage, to me it's hard to get away with it if you're setting up. That deer will come back if you're not in there.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because he's already proved to himself that he could get away. But that in that scenario, I'm going to mark that area and back out. I'm not going to hunt that night.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm gonna go in the next day with a game plan and get in there, set up downwind of where, if you're already walking right, you're following a faint trail or you're following something that you think is leading you to an area, right? So you're already following sign, and then once you get to it and it's too late, boom, you bump up a buck. It's a good buck. I wouldn't even waste my time setting up right there. I'd come in, I'd mark that spot. I'd come in the very next day with a game plan and set up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do.
Jake Bush did this when he first moved to Ohio. He was coming in late. He didn't get any of the scouting in and just went out off the points, bumping deer so he could get his eyes on
absolutely
the target that he wanted.
Yeah.
And he went back and killed him.
Yep.
We're on here now for over an hour. Anything else about the Ty episode that you really wanted to get into?
Let's do the creating false competition.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's do that.
I told you off air. I mean, I will create a false sense of competition amongst other hunters just to motivate myself to get out there. I'll work 4 night shifts in a row. And instead of going home and going to sleep, I'll drive out to the public lands and I'll scout for 6, 7 hours and do my thing. So I just have to do it. It's part of who I am. It's in my DNA.
Yeah. So like what he's doing, his mindset, I think it's awesome because, he's doing whatever he needs to do to get it done. Like I relate to it with him on such a close level as like when I go into the season and it's not an option. It's my job. It's my job to get on a deer and get it done. You throw everything at it that you can and get aggressive and just balls to the wall. It is. It really is. So when he puts that, false sense of, that false competition in his head, like he wants to beat himself. He's in a competition with himself, and we're not talking competition where, hey, I'm holding up the bigger trophy. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset to where he's going to get it done. He's going to be better than that other person. He's going to push himself more. He says that he's, working the swing shifts, instead of going home and getting sleep, he's sacrificing sleep to go out and scout. Mm-hmm. Well, he's putting his homework. He's putting in his homework. He's doing everything that he needs to do to get it done. And that's what it takes to be a consistent hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm thinking right now, my mind is always in public land, right?
Yeah.
And so what about the guy who has got private? Your neighbor is your competition.
Oh, absolutely. Same mindset.
And I almost feel bad for you. It's almost worse for you because at least I'm public. I can chase after something.
Yeah. If you're stuck to a 10-acre piece, that would kind of suck.
And if
I used to want a 40-acre chunk, right?
Yeah.
When you start breaking it down and thinking about it, you can't even manage a 40-acre chunk.
No.
It's not big enough. Yeah. You're not big enough until you start looking at a 200-acre piece. And then they have some room. You have to have that layout, that land, that security cover, just the diversity in the land itself. Like, the whole public land, man, it drives me. It drives me because I can go wherever I want and go put together a game plan.
Yeah.
I love it. Any public land hunter is a rich man. He's got thousands and thousands of acres. I mean, you can move around. You can use that human pressure and whoever's parking in those, small sections of public land and use them people to your advantage. Get around them. That human pressure, you can cut a piece of, a hat. If you take, let's say, if you're on a 200-acre piece of public land and you have one access to it, well, guess what? I'm going to look at the second half, that second 100-acre, the farthest one in. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm going. That's where you're going to find me.
So right now, I'm just thinking of me listening to podcasts before I did podcasts, and I'm like, shut up, stop talking about public. I don't want anybody else out there. But also to your point and to Ty's point, that is why you're aggressive, because it's like if I don't go after and get it done, someone else will.
Yeah. Well, in that aggressive part, like, I mean, saying that, like, being aggressive, like, I'm gonna go where the other guys aren't going. Mm-hmm. And last year I've hunted a couple spots where I didn't think that there was going to be a guy in there, and I got him on camera.
Yeah.
I remember on a couple of my cell cams. I'm like, wow, I hands down to you, buddy.
I don't even know how I know which one you're talking about. It's that one that you and I scouted.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like middle of the day, like I'm like, wow, how'd you get back here? Like, I thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going in an area where I'm like literally following my OnX, like without my phone. And my portable charger, I'd be lost in there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anything else about Ty? There was one going after and find the deer above all things. Let's play that clip.
Like I said earlier, like that is first and foremost, just finding them. Mm-hmm. Everything else is secondary. Tree stand, gear, everything is so secondary. The weapon of choice, just find the deer.
That is one of the most fire statements that you could say. I mean, right there, to do whatever it takes to get out, and you got to find the deer. If you want a 150, go out and find that 150. Don't just go out in the woods and go expect to shoot a 150. You go lay eyes on it, get cameras out, get some intel on a deer that caliber that you want to shoot, and get a game plan together. Like, because you're not going to shoot that 150 if you don't go out and find that deer. Like you have to have a mindset where you can do you're going to do whatever it takes to go find them deer.
Yeah, but Chris, I gotta really work on my gear, and there's some really cool gear coming out.
Screw your gear.
It's like it's 2 ounces lighter, Chris. I mean, it's so important for me to get that.
Look, no. If you have gear that works, don't fix it. If it ain't broken, it doesn't matter. You don't need camo. You don't need all that fancy high end stuff. You don't.
So I wasn't making fun of anybody. That was Matt from about, I don't know, 12 years ago, who was just fixated on.
I did it too.
On gear, and I thought gear was going to be the thing that got me to kill.
I was in that stage where I wanted an Ozonics. I believed in Ozonics. I own one. Do I use it? I hope my wife ain't listening. I don't use it because I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
I've purposely set up in areas where I was gonna like blow my scent into doe bedding, and I got blew at.
Yep.
You got to play the win.
Yep.
So it's and
he goes in to say, look, he probably spends more time on gear than the average guy, but comparatively to finding and knowing the deer, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And then he says, give me a bucket with a sharp stick and I'll kill it. Like, absolutely. I love that there.
Yeah, because finding the deer, if you found the deer and you have a weapon, whether it's $1,000 bow or a $300 bow, and it shoots an arrow, if it's a lethal weapon, you're going to kill that deer.
Yeah.
Because you did your homework.
And this goes like, we're not trying to shit on people who like gear. If you like gear and that's what brings you joy, then no, that's what's the thing that's going to bring you joy, and you're not going to have consistency killing big bucks if you're going to put all your time into gear. And I honestly, I think it's all about enjoyment. You need to do things that bring you joy. So if that brings you joy, great. But then don't bother yourself and come down on yourself for not killing big deer all the time. Just enjoy the gear.
Right.
But if you want to kill on this level, then you need to move past that and start learning the deer. And for the guy out there who doesn't have, all the money to go out and get the most high end, well, guess what? That's great news for you. Keep what you got, forget everything else, and go out and find the deer and shoot the damn thing on the ground if you have to. Yeah.
Start thinking like the deer. I do that all the time. I try to think like a deer.
Yeah.
Like how you would actually think. Put yourself as a human in the woods. If you had to sleep out in the woods and you didn't want to be bothered, or you didn't want to be mauled by a bear or a coyote or wolf, where are you going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself in water, like where them predators don't. You start putting your mind into a deer's aspect. You can somewhat kind of figure it out. There's a little common sense there.
Well, Chris, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
I know, right?
Was there anything else? That was the last one I think that we really needed to get out there. And we're going to talk to Ty here in a second. He's coming up next. So I can unpack some of the other stuff. The main thing, what are the main points here that you think from listening to this podcast that people really need to grab onto?
Just the whole aspect of like doing whatever it takes. You got to get aggressive. You got to put in your homework. This guy's figuring it out, and he's consistent, and he's killing these mature bucks. Like if you want to get on that level and be a black belt, you need to get out there. It's boots to the ground. Stay consistent. Stay after it. Never give up on hunting. Like when deer season ends for whatever state that you're in, it's not done. Mm-mm. Start your year right after that season ends. Start the next year right after your deer season's done, because that's the beginning stage of it all. Because you don't have to worry about getting or bumping deer anymore, or worried about like going into areas that you want to hunt. Well, it doesn't matter anymore because that season's done. Start that season off the next year, right? We're here in Michigan, so January it would be for us. Get right after it. Do whatever it takes. Like, I mean, when it's off season, you can be careless. Go out there, wander all over the woods, zigzag. It doesn't really matter. Try to pay attention to what you're looking at. But, in the postseason stuff, how many guys that go out there that I know that wait till August, September, and they don't get it done. They'll shoot a 180-inch buck, and they're happy with it.
Yeah.
But if you want to take it to the next level, you got to stay consistent. You got to put your homework in. And I know you hear this in every podcast, but you're not going to be consistent if you're not staying on it 365.
And I think you can go in phases because you have to, Ty talks about this, making sacrifices. You have to be willing to make the sacrifices. And there may be other things that are more important to you than going out and being consistent killing mature deer. And that's okay. But you can still go out in postseason. And even if you did that 2-3 times, it's going to increase your odds for the next season. You know,
if you're a new guy getting into it and this is what you want to do and be a black belt to get to that level, I think you do need to sacrifice and put it all in.
Oh, that's not what I was saying. If you're going to be a black belt, you have to.
Until you get that historical knowledge, learn your areas, and then once you start getting some knowledge, like 2-3 years into it, like right now, I haven't been out in the woods. I've been building a house. Well, but I did do some postseason scouting, and it was very promising. One outing all day long. I think it was a 13-hour day. I put in, I don't even know how many miles. I don't even need to talk about it. It was a full day, a full commitment. And just going off of that one day, I already feel good about going into the season if I can't get out this summer and scout.
Yep.
I want to, but even for me, like come deer season, I'll go and bump deer and I'll go find them.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's my job and I'm going to get it done.
Yeah. What I'm saying is like, if you are a yellow belt and you don't have the time and dedication to become a black belt because other things are more important to you, well, okay, you're not going to perform like a black belt, but you can still go out and do some of these things.
Yeah.
And move up a belt level.
Yep.
And increase your odds and be more successful.
Yeah.
So, because I think sometimes there are guys who hear this and they're like, yes, I want to be a black belt. I'm all in. And let's just be really honest. Let's have that honest conversation. That is a small percentage of people. Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of our podcasts are pointed in conversations towards those small percentage of people. There's a lot larger group who, for whatever reason, if just have other obligations that they place higher than deer hunting, but still love deer hunting. My thing to them is don't shut off from this conversation. Don't listen to this and go, well, that I'm not going to be that guy. Well, you can still be better than what you are today. Yeah. You can still go out and postseason scout. You can still put a game plan together and get a couple days in the summertime, hanging some cameras, doing a little bit of glassing.
Yep.
And then you can do a little bit better during the season than what you would have done if you didn't.
Right. Right.
And so that's a real reasonable approach for a lot of people. Yeah, you're not going to be Ty, you're not going to be a black belt, but you can be a yellow belt, you can be a blue belt.
Yeah.
Move up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to move up a little bit every year.
Move up.
It's crazy.
You're already there. You just don't put yourself there.
It's my damn dojo and I'm the white belt and I got all the black belts in here. Anyways. All right, man. This has been awesome. Chris, I can't thank you enough, dude. This is awesome.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad I can make the trip down here and
we'll definitely have you back on because I know I've got some hunting trips with you. I'll at least record with you then.
Yeah. I think we need to do some video too down there.
Yeah, for sure. Man, awesome. Let's jump over and we'll have Ty take it from here. All right, Ty, welcome back to the dojo, man. I really appreciate you coming on here and doing the breakdown with us. I've had fun doing it so far. So Chris Grant is a friend of mine. He's a guy that I would say is a high-level elite guy here in Michigan, real low-key guy. So I felt like I needed to bring him on to have another black belt kind of dissect some of the stuff that you talked about. And then there was just one topic that I felt like only you could speak on, and that is this topic of kind of like, finding and monitoring these bucks over time for, a long period of time. And so I really appreciate you coming on and be willing to give us a little bit more of your time and go deeper into that concept. I'm going to hand over the mic to you and just let you kind of go. And then, maybe at the end, if I need to, I'll ask a question.
Sure. Yeah. My pleasure. So I did kind of write out a little script here. You gave me the topic. So I wrote this out last night. I worked 4 night shifts in a row. So I had a little bit of time last night and I wrote this out, but I'm just going to read it if that's okay with you. I'm not sure how this format
That'd be perfect.
Yeah. So how to monitor target bucks. This is more like a procedure than a script, honestly. But the first thing that came to mind is the rotation between two phases of throughout the year. And that's find and study. So those are important. We talked a lot about finding the bucks in our podcast, and I don't think I touched on it in detail enough. Sometimes you take the information for granted and it's hard to articulate it when there's so much detail. So this stage, the find stage, which is the first stage, obviously in order to monitor a target buck, you need to find one first. So we'll go over that really quick. I know that's not part of monitoring, but it is the first step. This stage is aggressive, and I do not care about any impact at this stage. So this is knuckle dragger, like balls to the wall. You're blitzing, looking for a buck. And then you can obviously implement the study phase. So for the find stage, you need to scout areas, sign, and get sightings. Listen to the local hunters. Many of them are quick to share information on big bucks that they have seen or heard about. I've used this tactic to learn whereabouts of target bucks before. Glass and shine during all seasons. Open areas such as CRP, crop fields, logging roads, deep timber openings, river bottom floodplains, and pond edges or hillsides. You can bump deer to get eyes on them. This is a tactic that I use the most. If all else fails and you cannot find a target deer, I will get on my feet, go look for opportunities to visually verify there's one existing. Bedding areas, thickets, swamps, islands, transition areas, and feeding areas. Nothing's off limits. Again, impact is irrelevant. For those in states where trail cameras are legal, it should go without saying that these are obviously a very powerful tool for locating deer. So once we find a deer, we need to study it. So there's find phase, study phase, and you're going to rotate. Well, this is how I do it. I'm going to rotate between the two, depending on where I'm at. So once I locate a target animal, I need to study it as much as I possibly can. His behavior, tendencies, areas of inhabitants, and reactions to pressure stimulus. That's a big one. Bucks will shift between multiple bedding, feeding, and breeding areas based on the time of year. I find that the older a buck gets, the smaller and more predictable these areas and shifts are. At 6 years old or older, I find that a buck will have a very small and well-defined core area. You got anything for me so far? You want me to keep going?
No, so since you asked, I'll jump in. How small in general? Like, I know it's a general idea, but how small are you thinking?
For these older 6 or older, 5 or older deer, depending, I'm going to break down the two different behavioral categories that I have for deer. But for like a homebody deer, I've seen him live in a 10 to 25 acre area primarily. And obviously his home range is a little bigger, but I mean, at 6 years old, I've had a deer that I've hunted that has lived in, a small, like 50 acre section. So I define buck behavior into two categories: homebody and nomads. Homebody deer tend to have one core area between all 4 annual seasons. Depending on many factors, the core can be quite large, but it predictably shrinks up throughout the annual and seasonal timeframes. These bucks will generally inhabit a large portion of their core during the spring and summer, but gradually shrink into a smaller portion after their velvet sheds. Homebody bucks do not tend to make excursions outside of their core area. Homebody bucks are generally easy to identify if you can just continuously monitor them in the same areas repeatedly. You see them in the same section. It doesn't even have to be, day after day. If you can repeatedly get them in the same area, they're probably a homebody. Homebody deer tend to be timid despite large antlers or bodies. I've found that to be true. Keep this in mind when you're applying pressure through hunting tactics. This buck may not be reactive to aggressive calling. Nomads tend to have several core areas that they inhabit within a home range. Often they will be patternable for a week or days in one area, only to move miles away in the coming days or weeks. These cores are typically still well-defined and shrink with age, but are often unpredictable with respect to timing. Nomads will cover a lot of ground throughout any time frame. When you hear about these bucks that make a shift at the end of summer or any seasonal change, these are the bucks making those big moves. Nomads tend to be more aggressive, in my opinion. They inherently take more risk and are willing to respond to calling. They tend to make long excursions often. Now, if we found a target through the find phase, glassing, tracks, cameras, bumping them, just physically going and looking and finding and verifying that they're there. Now we have to study them. Regardless of the behavior category that the buck falls under, we need information. Whenever we find this target, wherever we find this target is where we need to start the profile development. So you found them, you made one visual. Start there. Seems simple, but we need to continue to use our find tools to monitor the target, glass him, get trail camera pictures of him, identify his track if you can. Take special note of what the other bucks he spends time with in the summer. This is important because oftentimes I see homebody deer specifically in the 5-6-year-old age range hanging out with subordinate bucks, one particular subordinate buck. And as long as you can visually identify him, he'll give away your target deep into the fall sometimes. So let's break down glassing a bit more. I think that's important. When glassing a target, it is important to take note of where and how he travels. Keep in mind the simple things. If you're glassing him in any open area or wherever you're glassing him, keep in mind the wind direction, the wind speed, weather, and how he travels under those conditions. Does he stay in low areas? Does he keep the high ground? What type of cover does he use, and does he maintain his cover? How fast does he move through the area? And how often does he check the wind? It's important to gather every bit of information as you can. Something else I like to do, if I'm not actively hunting the target during this time while I'm observing him, is a hard and soft bump. I want to alert him and see how he reacts and what his escape routes are. This can give you insight to where he wants to go and what he wants to do when the pressure's on. That's very important. Because eventually, if this deer does make a shift, you're going to want to know where he goes. So if you're just watching him mill around in a field, CRP, river bottom, and he just kind of staying stagnant, you don't know much about where he comes from, where he goes, what his escape routes are, how he likes to maintain cover. So I like to chase him down a little bit. So now let's go over the likely possibility that you lose the location of a target. Regardless of the time of year, we need to go back to the find phase. The best way to do this is to use the information you have gathered from the study phase, from the initial find location. Start working back through surrounding areas using glass, tracks, subordinate deer sightings that hang around the target, trail cameras, and perhaps the most effective way is boots on the ground, blitzing through other bedding areas, trying to get eyes on him with a bump. Simply put, I'll go explore as much as I can. And sorry, I lost my place here. It's basically a glorified scouting mission. I don't worry about the target vacating an area when I bump him. Typically, older age class bucks will not vacate a bedding area from just a bump or two. These deer are bumped all the time for various reasons, and the simple fact that they are still alive at an old age is validation enough that they trust these areas to keep coming back. This process needs to be repeated until you can reestablish observation of the target. Keep physically looking, checking scrapes for his track, glassing areas during evenings or shining if it's legal. Mornings or midday during inclement weather is always good. This isn't a guaranteed plan, but it gives you the best odds of maintaining a grasp on a target buck. It's all just a big game of hide and seek. The more time you can spend looking with all the tools available, the better chance you have at being able to hunt and kill your target buck. These tactics work all year for monitoring a target animal, and they should be used all year. Do not take the information gained from these practices for granted. This is powerful information that can be leveraged for future use. One of the reasons I choose to pursue particular animals each year is the massive amount of knowledge you can gain from fixating on a target buck. You may miss out on general herd information, but putting all of your eggs in one basket, I can assure you that the gratification from putting your hands on a target animal that you've developed extensive history with is absolutely second to none. So that's my script. That's my procedure.
Oh, that was
Not
awesome.
very well defined, but
No, it is. It's a question I have for you though, is like, how often are you glassing a target buck in the off season?
okay. If you feel like you have a good grasp on where he's at. I mean, it depends on what stage you are with this deer. If this is a new animal that, you know, maybe you've gotten one trail camera picture of, or maybe you've gotten a shed from, or whatever, and you don't have a ton of information. I mean, you got to be pedal to the metal. Every day you can be out there looking for them. Like I said, I don't mind putting the pressure on. Obviously, you don't want to be bumping them every time, but you need to get the information. So in the off season, if I had the choice, it would be every single day, but it's every day that I can. So a few times a week, once a week, whatever you can do, sacrifice a little sleep, a little, you know, time here or there, and find them. You have to find them.
Yeah.
To study it.
Do you ever ease up off them as opener approaches?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of information I have. So if you're getting closer to like September or October, we have an October 1 opener in New York State. So we don't get a lot of the like summertime patterns, a little bit, but I will. If I feel like I know where he's going to be at, or I have a decent idea, then I'll ease up. But if I don't have a target buck, or I've lost him, I just can't afford to do that. I mean, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Got to know where he's at.
So I know that you have a list of up and comers, and so as you have this target buck, are you also spending time watching the up and comers to kind of like build that history?
Yeah, that's one thing that I do need to get better at this point. You know, early on when I was targeting a specific animal, I was like keeping a profile of a lot of different bucks. And as I like fixate more and more on these 5, 6, 7-year-old deer, it's getting harder to do that. So I keep them in mind, but I think it's a good idea if you can do it, if you have the mental bandwidth. I'm just not an organized enough person to do that. It's like all my attention, every molecule, every fiber in me is focused on one deer.
Well, it's working for you.
Yeah.
So yeah. What another question when you talked about being organized, but you talked about a profile kind of development. Do you create a notes? Because you were talking about even the wind and all that kind of stuff. Are you writing notes as you're out in the field about what you're seeing?
Yes. So I'll put something in my phone or my computer, and I'll have, you know, videos from glassing or trail camera pictures or whatever, anything visual, and then I'll attach notes to it. And you know, I have a big whiteboard down here in this room that, and then a big dry erase map, and I'll take notes on that and lay all these things out. But yeah, I'm definitely taking detailed notes. I don't really use a whole lot of like the wind was this way, the wind was that way. You know, I check the wind for myself, but the deer, if he likes an area, it's my belief, especially with homebody deer, that they're going to spend time in that area regardless of the wind. And they're just going to position themselves inside that small core.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I thought that's fantastic. I mean, it's even hard for me. You're on a level and you're doing things that are on a level that it's hard to actually do follow-up questions on, just to be honest. And so I really appreciate you coming on. Some of the stuff we were able to kind of put our guests on, and I suspect you're going to listen and go, that's not what I'm talking about when we're doing it. But in some areas, I hope that you do. I hope we got it right. But I can't thank you enough for coming back here, especially on this topic. I received a lot of feedback about our podcast, probably the most feedback that I've ever received. And it was this desire to actually hear more from you and in more detail. And so I thank you so much for coming back and doing this. It's really helpful.
Yeah, if you just keep it simple, man, it's just this little procedure that I wrote last night at 3:00 in the morning. It's 2 phases: find and study. And then you just go back and forth. If you find yourself in a position where you don't have a target deer, or you've lost that target deer, hopefully you have a property big enough, or a situation where you can, you know, gain access to a property big enough, and just go find them again. It's just that simple. You know, a lot of guys get caught up on, you know, I got to hunt today. I got to hang a tree stand today. I got to carry my bow today. You don't have to do that. Go find him. Go bump him around. He's going to come back.
That is the biggest piece that's going to come out of this, I think. I mean, all of this is next level stuff and great information. What I think is game changer is this idea that you're like, I want to bump him. I want to see how he responds on a soft bump and on a hard bump. And, you know, and again, you're discerning the level and how many times you do that. But I mean, we've been told forever, like, don't do that.
Don't.
Yeah. And you're
I'll give
going
you-
the opposite.
I'll give you an example. I was out last week and I was glassing, and I came up on a whole bunch of deer in a bean field. And one of them was a decent, probably a 3-year-old. They have some main beam and some twos on them right now, so it's hard to tell. And their bodies are just, so small. But I'm looking at this deer and where he is and all the other deer, and I'm like, they got to be coming off, the downside of this hill here, whatever. I just started going through all the scenarios in my mind where these deer were hanging out. So I bumped them. I wanted to see where they went, and they went a totally different way. And I bumped them in a way that they could go wherever they wanted. Like I didn't push them anywhere. It was organic where they wanted to go. And it was completely opposite. And right there, it's like, if I didn't do that, and that was a situation where I was going to hunt that deer, I would have hunted them completely wrong. I would have been misled. So now I know this is where their escape is. This is probably where they're coming out. And I can go from there.
It makes so much sense when you say it, so I do appreciate it a lot. And I know you've been working some long hours, and I think you got very little sleep. So thank you for taking the time to write that out. Thank you for taking the time to come back on here again and to break this down. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And so does all the listeners do too. Like, you're definitely a favorite from everybody that was listening to the podcast. And yeah, so I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Matt. I appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. That's a wrap for the first episode of The Breakdown. I cannot thank Chris Grant for coming out to the dojo and lending his expertise to break down all these different aspects of episode 21, Ty Jennings, thinking outside the box. And I cannot thank Ty enough for coming back to the dojo and breaking down his 2-step process of find and study. I think this is going to warrant a couple listens, even by me, and I was a part of it, to get all the information out of it. I hope you enjoyed. And again, we will have this podcast on the last Thursday of every month. And until then, embrace the journey. Well, that is a wrap for us here at the dojo. We'll be back next Thursday with another Whitetail Master. You can also listen to us every Tuesday for our 10-minute Tuesday episode, where I break down a tactic, talk about mindset and personal development, or anything else that might jump in my head in 10 minutes or less. If you like what we are doing here at the dojo, please give us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Mobile Hunters Dojo.